He didn't shout. He barely raised his voice. But when Gino leaned forward on the tell-all stage, folder in hand, face tight with that deadpan disappointment, and said, "Let Matt pay for her visa," the air snapped. That wasn't fighting dirty. That was going nuclear. Deportation isn't a word you throw around like an insult. It's not liar or cheater or fake. It's a threat aimed straight at someone's life. And Gino threw it like it was nothing. Welcome to TLC Drama Files. I'm Aliva. And if you've ever seen a meltdown so cold it burned, this was it. Subscribe if you're breathing, because the drama in this room didn't just break hearts, it weaponized immigration. And yes, I need to hear your takes in the comments, because this wasn't reality TV anymore. It was televised warfare. The moment he said those words, those 7 casual, loaded, soul-punching syllables, you could see Jasmine's entire body freeze. Her breathing changed. Her jaw twitched. Whatever performance she'd rehearsed before walking into that house, gone. And the silence from the cast said what no one had the nerve to say out loud. This wasn't a lover's spat. This was a deportation threat on reality TV. Rewind a bit. Their relationship had always skated that line between dysfunction and disaster. From the Michigan basement arguments to resort hotel stairs that could peel drywall, Gino and Jasmine have always written their own rules. Not all of them loving, and definitely not all of them legal. But this was an entirely different game. By the time Jasmine gave birth to her daughter, the stakes should have calmed. Instead, they detonated. Nobody expected Gino to go after her motherhood, but turning her status in the country into a bargaining chip, that was another level entirely. Because when Gino said, "Let Matt pay," referring to Jasmine's new relationship, he wasn't being petty, he was circling her like a shark, sniffing out the one thing she couldn't fake, couldn't talk around, couldn't therapy out of the spotlight, her visa. He made a public case that she wasn't a partner, she was baggage. And we've seen this before, haven't we? In too many relationships, love gets replaced by leverage. People start doing math instead of emotional labor. I filed your papers. I paid for your medicals. I waited months. You owe me. It's not romance anymore. It's receipts. And in Gino's mind, Jasmine was now a debt with a deadline. Viewers watching live lit up. Every group chat Reddit had to offer. The thread titles wrote themselves, "Is Gino calling immigration?" She's scared. Not angry. Is this still about cheating or controlling? Instagram Reels replayed her line, "You're not immigration," on loop. But the tone she used didn't sound like a counterattack. It sounded like panic. And look at her face carefully in that scene. In that moment, it wasn't hurt pride. It wasn't hurt feelings, it was danger. Jasmine knew exactly what was happening. One sentence and she wasn't a person anymore. She was a file folder, a risk assessment, a green card under review. Because when someone you loved says, "Go back to your country," with a smirk, and a camera crew, what does the audience see first? The tear she held back, or the man who already packed a folder full of her evidence? What happens when a breakup becomes a deportation bait on camera? Keep watching. Back in Michigan, Jasmine and Gino couldn't even split groceries without an argument. But even at their worst, she never imagined those fights would scale into threats with legal weight. And she definitely didn't think he'd draw legal blood on national television. Maybe that's what stung most, the total ease in his face, like he'd rehearsed it. Like he'd been waiting for the right moment to drop it for effect. Not for justice, but for vengeance with an audience. If Gino's immigration bomb set the house on fire, what happened next swallowed it in smoke. The front door creaked open. Mid-segment, and no one, not Jasmine, not even the producers, was ready for who walked in. Dana, Gino's older brother. Calm face, tight shoulders, and a voice that had something loaded behind it. Behind him, Michelle and Anthony, Gino's sister-in-law and nephew, filed in, avoiding Jasmine's eyes. You could feel the audience shift. This wasn't support. This was testimony. On the surface, it looked like a family visit. But seconds in, it turned into an ambush. The host tried to welcome them with her usual fake sunny tone, but Dana didn't wait for the cue. He sat forward, planted his hand on his knee, and dropped it flat. 1 week after she got here, Gino called me. Said he already knew this marriage wouldn't work. The studio went dead silent. Jasmine didn't blink. For half a second, her whole face froze like her brain just blew ek. Screamed. Then her eyes started darting like she was trying to catch up to her own thoughts. The camera zoomed in just as she mouthed almost involuntarily. What? Gino whipped his head toward Dana like he'd been slapped. That's not true. He shot back, but Donna didn't flinch. You said you made a mistake, Gino. That she was already too much work. The audience gasped. This wasn't speculation. This was someone inside Gino's family circle. On record, on film, contradicting every version he's been spinning since season. Jasmine turned toward Gino, now visibly shaking, and whispered almost to herself. So, I was the backup plan. Dana kept going, calm, measured. But every word felt like another floor collapsing beneath Gino's story. He said he regretted rushing it. That it was harder than he thought, that he was already thinking way out. Gino tried to talk over him. I was venting. That's not, Michelle interrupted. You said it on speaker. We both heard it. Don't lie now just because the cameras are rolling. And that's when even the host stopped pretending this was under control. You could see Jasmine piecing it together in real time. Wait, so Gina wasn't blindsided by her behavior? He wasn't confused or heartbroken from betrayal. He walked into the marriage, eyes wide open knowing it wouldn't work, and still filed the paperwork, smiled for the cameras, and flew them both straight into hell. Business as usual, but with better lighting. And this is where the bigger question slid into everyone's minds. If Gino knew so soon that Jasmine wasn't the one, why did he stay? Why file? Why film? Sympathy, ego, the TLC check, or was it about having someone to control from day one? And fair or not, Dana's words shifted the weight of suspicion. Jasmine might have been volatile, complicated, reactive. But Gino suddenly looked strategic. Maybe too measured, like he'd been laying groundwork for this meltdown longer than anyone realized. And just when Jasmine thought the worst was past, Ano's own brother dropped a live grenade. She turned her head slowly, looked straight into the audience, not the camera, and muttered. So I was never a wife. I was a storyline. No one replied, because no one could, not even Gino. There it was again. The infamous folder. Same creased edges, same smug grip. Like Gino had been clutching it since the beginning of time. He slammed it on his lap, peeled back the cover, and started flipping with this audible calm that somehow made things worse. The cast froze. Jasmine blinked twice, her hands locked like she'd forgotten they were hers. She didn't even speak right away. She just watched him page through what he clearly believed was ironclad truth. Screenshots, call logs, usernames, timestamps, Exhibit A through Z. He didn't glance up when he started reading. Pieces out loud. Here's the message from before the open marriage. There's the name of the guy. There's the overlap. It's all here. And that's when everything shifted, because this wasn't about betrayal anymore. This was about branding. Gino wasn't using this to understand Jasmine. He was using it to define her. To her, this folder symbolized pain. To him, it was the backup drive for his pride. She inhaled sharply, like someone trying to hold in an earthquake. And for the first time in minutes, the cracks started showing. Her leg bounced. Her eyes didn't blink and sink. She wasn't breathing through her nose. She was gulping air fast and shallow. Her therapist's voice probably screamed in her head. Stillness, regulation, pause. But how do you stay still when every page turned is another swing at your life? One of the cast whispered under their breath, "This feels like court, not closure." And suddenly that was all you could see. He wasn't here to heal. He was here to win. This was strategy, procedure. He wasn't her ex anymore. He was her prosecutor. If he really believed she was fraudulent, why marry her? Why wait this long to say it? Why hold the receipts like sacred text instead of speaking his pain directly? One answer. Control. Some men can't feel loved until they lose it and prove it was fake. They don't grieve the ending. They curate the timeline like a Wikipedia moderator on caffeine. Cross-referenced, time-stamped, color-coded pain. And Jasmine saw it, not just in his face, but in the way he held that folder tighter than he'd held her in months. She whispered it under her breath, barely audible. But the mic caught it anyway. You carry it like it's a passport to dignity. Gino didn't look at her. He just nodded. Like proving she lied on paper meant she never loved in person. As if the truth could only matter once it was printable. But the most ruthless proof wasn't in the folder. It was what he didn't say yet. He still hadn't mentioned the baby. He hadn't asked about her health. Hadn't once used the word daughter. And Jasmine knew whatever was coming next wasn't about fidelity. It was about future. Leverage. And that folder, it was never about justice. It was a stage prop. Without warning, Gino leaned forward barely above a whisper. 4 words. No. Folder this time. No raised voice. Just pure surgical precision. I want a test. That was it. No build-up. No segue. Just detonation. Jasmine didn't move. Her face didn't collapse at first. It drained. The color slid. Her blink froze. Mid-motion. Every nerve in her body seemed to bristle at once, but none of them fired. The kind of numb that happens right before the body figures out how to panic. Across the set, nobody spoke. You could hear someone in the third row gasp. Another clutched their chest like they'd walked into a church service mid-confession. Even the producers, eyes glued to the monitors, knew the exit wound had just been created. Gino didn't look proud. He looked unwavering. I want to know if the baby's mine. One sentence. 0 heart. Straight black ink. A few cast members shot each other looks, not out of disbelief, but out of discomfort because you could feel it. This wasn't about paternity. This was about power. This was control being played out in full definition with stakes that couldn't be undone in editing. Jasmine's shoulder started to shake. She didn't cry yet. She didn't scream, but her voice barely held together. We were married when she was conceived. Like facts would matter in a room running on resentment. But Facts weren't the point. Gino wasn't asking a question. He was removing safety. Let's be honest. The moment someone says, "I want a DNA test during a breakup," it's not about biology. It's about branding. He wasn't doubting the science. He was doubting her story. The woman, the mother. He wanted the audience, America, to reconsider their sympathy, to stop seeing Jasmine as betrayed and start seeing her as calculated. And worse, he wanted permission to walk away clean, because if the child wasn't his, he wouldn't owe her emotional debt or legal one or anything she could use in court or on camera. Jasmine finally spoke again, but this time slower. "I don't care about the test." She paused, turning toward him. Not in anger, but devastation. "I care that you need one." That cracked the room. It wasn't drama anymore. It was heartbreak in the form of logic. The damage wasn't in the test. It was in the request. Because after everything, filming, fighting, forgiving, if that's where Gino needed proof, it meant nothing had ever been secure. No amount of sobbing, no reconciliation, no vows. All of it was conditional. And Jasmine wasn't a partner. She was a theory that still needed to prove itself. Quietly, her voice dropped again. "You loved me, but you trusted paperwork more." But that wasn't Gino's endgame. He wasn't dragging her for the baby. He wanted the finale. And Jasmine realized it as fast as we did. This wasn't about truth. It was positioning. The test wasn't about the child. The child was now evidence. A few minutes after the DNA shockwave, the host shifted tones gently, carefully, like trying to talk someone off a ledge. She looked at Jasmine, then at her left hand. It had been still in her lap ever since Gino's demand, but now it was empty. Bare, no sparkle, no metal. "You're not wearing your rings," she said softly. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. Her voice came measured, a little too calm. "I melted them into earrings," she said, then added, "for my daughter." The room sucked in breath like it had teeth. Even the audience gasped. You could hear one person whisper, "She what?" And Gino. It was the first time his face cracked since the folder. Color lit up his cheeks. But it didn't look like passion. It looked like humiliation. Raw, slow, aching humiliation. She wasn't done. I didn't want her growing up thinking those rings were a memory of something sacred. They weren't. Jasmine said they were armor I wore during a war I didn't know I was already losing. The earrings, she said, were both beautiful and sharp. I gave them a new purpose, she added, so she wouldn't look back and inherit my pain. You could feel half the cast shift. Uncomfortably. Someone murmured, "That's kind of brilliant." Another looked away. Unsure if this was poetry or PR. Because here's the thing. Was it empowerment or was it image control? Did Jasmine transmute trauma into a symbol of grace for her child? Or did she send a visual message to social media before Gino could post another receipt? Let's not pretend this wasn't strategic, too. Rings melted into earrings is the kind of mic drop made for a carousel post. The comment section writes itself, but it also wasn't empty because women like Jasmine don't get to leave quietly. Not when the world's watching their breakdown frame by frame, tweet by tweet. Maybe what she did wasn't healing, but it was reclaiming. And in a space where her entire identity was questioned on camera, maybe turning a symbol into something sharper was survival. Still, Gino's face said it all. He didn't see a mother making a statement. He saw a woman melting proof. He opened his mouth, stared dead at the camera, and dropped another grenade. She can wear as many earrings as she wants. But I'm not calling the baby mine till I see the proof. But nothing would prepare anyone for Gino's next shot. Calling the baby not mine till proven. On national TV, Jasmine didn't scream. Didn't cry. Her breath hitched once, and that sound alone said she'd just taken another hit. She wasn't sure she'd get up from. She didn't slam the door, she didn't curse. She didn't throw a drink. Or grab her mic and storm off like a finale. Jasmine just stood up, adjusted her dress with trembling fingers, and walked out quietly like grief had reached her feet before her voice. Everyone watched her leave in silence. Even Gino, even the producers, who were already signaling the crew to prep for a backstage camera switch, didn't move too fast, too calculated. They expected fireworks. What they got was the sound of heels on tile and a woman choosing retreat over breakdown. But she came back. Not even 3 minutes later, she re-entered the studio, face blank, hair tucked behind her ears like she needed to shed every trace of what had just been said. No tears, just cold breath. The host didn't ask if she was okay. No one did. The silence in that studio had a job now, to make space for her next move. She sat down, looked at Gino like she was staring at a man whose shadow she'd once trusted. I've survived worse. She whispered, barely audible. A message to herself more than anyone else. Gino pulled out the smirk again. That tight-lipped condescension he thinks looks like calm but lands like contempt. But not legal proof, he muttered under his breath. That was the trigger. Because in Gino's world, dignity isn't built. It's filed. It's notarized. And Jasmine, she didn't meet his standards anymore. Not as a partner, not as a witness, and definitely not as a mother. And that's the twisted thing about control in toxic relationships. It hides behind logic, behind reason, behind rank. And paper and phrases like, I have the right to know. They don't scream. They document. The cast started to shift. Arms crossed, seats adjusted. They weren't picking sides, but the energy said it all. This wasn't love. This was litigation on set. Then Gino relaxed into his chair, shrugged, and nailed the line producers would clip all week. I'm not sending her back. The system will. The camera cut to Jasmine. That was it. The crack. And for the first time, she didn't sound angry. She sounded frightened. You're not immigration, she shouted. But her voice faltered on the last syllable, as if even she knew. In that moment he didn't need to be. And in that fear, the ratings go up. But the real story goes darker. Because when love ends in court metaphors, the next stop isn't heartbreak. It's paperwork. She walked in like she rehearsed it. Chin up, shoulders back, not a single hair out of place. Natalie didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her entrance was less guest appearance and more, your past has arrived with receipts. Jasmine locked eyes with her, and the tension in the room shifted fast from panic to precision. Natalie sat down gracefully. Legs crossed, mic already live, voice low, but loaded. I'm here because Jasmine physically grabbed me during filming. No warm-up, no soft approach. Straight to it. The host blinked, stunned. Jasmine looked at the crew. Then back at Natalie. For a moment, she looked like someone trying to remember if the world was still filming or if this was a bad dream halfway through. I was hurt. Not dangerous, Jasmine said. Quiet, but clear. Natalie didn't flinch. Human or not, you crossed a line. And Suddenly this wasn't about healing anymore or trauma or love. It was about optics. Producers confirmed the incident. Quiet nod. A cue passed off. Camera and the studio lights shifted. A screen rolled footage. Quick choppy cuts. Jasmine on edge. Natalie walking away. Jasmine reaching. Contact made. Not a slap. Not a punch. But there it was. Contact. Unwelcome. Caught on film. The jury, the audience, the cast, the camera didn't speak. They didn't have to. Their faces said it. This might be who she really is. And Jasmine knew it. She tried talking again. You don't know what it's like being pushed and triggered and watching the man who ruined your life flirt FT away. Natalie cut her off. That's your trauma. Not your license. That line landed like a locked door. Because here's the thing. Once a woman earns the label of unstable, there's no intermission, no pause for growth, no benefit of the therapy doubt, nobody waits for your context. They just watch for the next explosion. And that's the most brutal part. Jasmine might have been growing. But now no one was listening to evidence. They were watching for emotion. Because when a woman is already labeled emotional, facts stop mattering. Optics do. And the more Jasmine tried to explain, the more it sounded like noise wrapped in a meltdown waiting to happen. The edit had already taken hold. Gino snapped first. You could see it before he opened his mouth. The shift in his jaw, the narrowed eyes, the hand twitching like it wanted to reach for that folder again. But this time it was his voice doing the damage. I'll be filing for full legal dissolution. No support, no postpartum anything. I'm done. The words hit like hard water. Fast, cold, no warning. And that last part, postpartum anything, wasn't just cruel. It was calculated. Jasmine jerked her head toward him. The way someone does when they feel slapped without being touched. Oh, please, she hissed. You picked me like a product in a catalog. Now you want a refund? The cast audibly gasped. Even the host flinched. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was true and too damn sharp. Gino's face flushed in real time. But Jasmine wasn't backing down. Not now. Her voice shook, but her aim didn't. You love the idea of me. The version you could correct. Now that I caused too much in therapy and receipts, you went out with a clean record. They moved past arguing. They were performing pain like it was theater. Now, each line aimed to humiliate, not hurt. Every shout wasn't a plea. It was punctuation. This wasn't even about the baby or the cheating or the visa anymore. It was grief and drag. Two people mourning the image of what the relationship was supposed to be and blaming each other for the burial. The host leaned forward, trying to pause it all. Let's take a break, she said. But no one blinked. They didn't move. The hurt had momentum. Now. You owe me respect, Gino shouted. Jasmine turned quieter but sharper. You owe me peace. They didn't look at each other after that. The silence that followed was jagged. The cast looked around like someone spilled blood but forgot to clean it up, but there is no peace left. When reputation becomes currency and love turns to ledger entries. What used to be a couple breaking up looked more like two lawyers fighting over emotional real estate in front of a live studio jury. And neither one was willing to surrender first. Jasmine didn't stand like she was leaving. She stood like she'd been holding on to that chair for too long. Like her spine had absorbed too many blows, seated across from a man who knew how to look calm while dismantling her. From the inside out. Her heels clicked against the stage floor. Soft but final. She didn't raise her voice. No exit line for drama. Just one line. Simple human. I loved you. You filed papers. Gino didn't look up. The line didn't move him. Not the way it moved everyone else. The silence amplified it. And it hit harder because of what it left unsaid. How love dissolved into a stack of forms, a receipt trail, a folder in his lap that looked more cherished than the woman who wore his rings. The host cleared her throat, trying to steer the wreckage. Jasmine, do you fear deportation now? Jasmine turned her head. Slightly. Not to Gino, not to the host. Almost to the space between them. I don't fear being sent back, she said. I fear kids growing up thinking love comes with receipts. That your worth can be measured by who paid for your paperwork. One of the cameras zoomed in slowly. No music, no reaction from Gino. He sat still like her words didn't apply anymore. Emotionally logged out. Jasmine walked away in silence. No rage, no speech, no finger pointing. Because that's the thing with real grief. It quiets you. You speak less. Not more. Until you're reduced to saying only what you never wanted to need to say. Behind her, Gino remained seated. The same posture, same smirk-like expression, still holding the folder. The same one that had followed him from interviews to airports to studios and now across camera angles watched around the world. The host looked over at him, paused. Is that the closure you wanted? She asked. Her voice was genuinely soft now. Not TV soft real. He didn't answer right away. He just frowned. Looked at the papers in his hands. Shifted once in his seat. Then, almost under his breath, but still caught by the mic, he muttered, maybe it's time to send her back. Audience. Dead silent like a cold draft had just swept through the bones of the entire room. Not from laughter, not even outrage yet, just shock. Because this wasn't a punchline anymore. It was policy coming out of someone's mouth who slept next to that woman for years. The host blinked, stunned. You mean for good? Gino didn't give her anything. No nod, no explanation, just silence. And you could tell that silence wasn't about being lost. He felt resolved. Hollow. Sure, but resolved. The camera stayed on his face, and for the first time, it looked less like revenge and more like disconnection, like a man who'd cut the wire not just between them, but inside himself. And Jasmine had heard it anyway. But even off camera, she heard him say it, and the next part broke her silence permanently. Backstage, she stood near the hallway, unmaked, but surrounded by crew who knew better than to make eye contact. One of the producers quietly whispered what she'd missed while walking out. Told her Gino's line word for word. Her lips didn't move at first, like she needed the language to settle in. Then she laughed. Not loud, not cruel, that tired kind of laugh people let out when they've run out of shocks to be shocked by. She turned toward the hallway mirror. Near the makeup station. Stared at herself, shoulders drawn, lipstick slightly smudged, heels 2 clicks too tight, but spine unnervingly straight. And she said quietly, so that's it. Not heartbreak, deportation as closure. She looked at the camera operator behind her. My whole life reduced to whether he forgave the price tag. The operator said nothing, didn't nod, didn't even blink. Because how do you comfort someone who wasn't just hurt but stripped of her right to stay? Then Jasmine added, her voice lower flat. He brought me here. Now he wants to send me back like I'm something broken in shipping. She turned around fully now. Made eye contact with the nearest camera and the flash in her face wasn't fury anymore. It was war. The version of Jasmine who used to cry on cue makes scenes spiral into sound bites. She vanished with every second of silence from that stage. And in her place was someone who didn't want anyone's forgiveness. She wanted clarity. That this wasn't about love anymore. It was about being erased. Quietly, legally, and sealed with paper cuts labeled fraud. Back on the sound stage, the host looked out into the quiet seats. Gino sat alone now. Still. The folder sat in his hands like a trophy. The love story was long gone, but the evidence remained. Stamped. Sorted, safe. And maybe that's how he liked it. The hotel lamp was dim. Her voice was quieter than it had ever been. But the cameras were still rolling. They always were. Jasmine sat on the edge of the bed, no makeup left, hair pulled back in a loose tie, her hands resting on her thighs like even they didn't know what to hold on to anymore. The silence in the room wasn't for drama. It felt like the world had shut off and only she knew it. Now I'm the one with the bags, she muttered, glancing at her half-packed suitcase by the door. It wasn't a joke, not fully. More like a truth coated in dust. She laughed a little. Not ironic, not bitter, just empty. The kind of laugh that fills space so you don't hear your own thoughts echo. And that's the part nobody ever films on purpose. After the tension, after the ratings spike, when the lights stop blazing, and all that's left is the aftermath pulsing behind captions and retweets. When the character becomes a person again, only the damage stayed on the skin. She stood slowly, not stiffly, but with intention. Ritual, like every movement meant something now. Shirts folded one by one. Baby clothes set in plastic bags labeled by age. The melted ring earrings next to the passport. Her toothbrush still wet from the last use wrapped in a tissue. With no ceremony at all. No yelling, no impulse, just execution. And as she zipped the final compartment, she didn't cry. If I get sent back, she whispered. Already speaking like the choice had passed hands, at least I gave the truth first, then silence, just her breathing. I didn't come here for a green card. I came here because I believed love fixed things. I thought if I gave everything I had, it would be enough. She adjusted her jacket, glancing at herself in the mirror. But when love is built on paperwork, the love part doesn't matter. Just the filing dates. She grabbed her charger, rolled it up tight, paused for a moment to stare at her reflection. Again. He brought me here, but I'm walking out whole. And that was the last thing she said on camera. The crew nodded quietly. No one interviewed her. No catch-up confessional. No final sit-down. Her ride was already downstairs. As she stepped out into the hallway, Jasmine didn't look like she lost. She looked like someone who knew what losing her silence meant, and she'd chosen to speak anyway. The credits never rolled. The lights didn't fade. But the chapter closed when the door clicked behind her. And if you thought Jasmine and Gino's case was rare, wait till you see the next couple using the same playbook with higher stakes and colder lies. That's in the next video.